hello again. So I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about the specifics of the first paper you have to write for this class, the first draft of which is due September 15th. So I made another video that you'll find in this same folder talking about personal narrative more broadly and making a distinction between two different categories of personal narrative, memoir and autobiography. Some people might go a step farther and draw a line between memoir and personal narrative. That's a line that I kind of reject. I think I would argue that personal narrative is a kind of family of different animals of writing, of text. But there, we could argue about that. But the main point of the other video was just to create a framework to think about how you should begin to approach writing this paper. And this one, I just wanted to kind of go into the specifics of the assignment prompt, this one in particular. So I'm going to show you my screen and we'll go over it. And then we'll have time to talk about it on Thursday. All right, so first and foremost, this is a different kind of paper than the other ones you'll be writing in this class. It's a personal narrative, which we can draw a line between that and an essay, right? So the difference is that this doesn't necessarily have to be organized around an clearly stated thesis. Now you could do that. You could make an argument and set forth validating your claim, your argumentative claim, with details from your own life. But a lot of times that ends up being leading to kind of just broad, opinionated statements rather than being really rooted in anything concrete. So it's probably better for most of you to just try to tell a specific story. And, it should still be, if you watch the other video, then the first thing you should be doing is thinking about what details you're going to select. The act of selection is so important in this endeavor. And so you can sort of let the reader draw their own conclusions. That doesn't mean that you're not making a point or taking a side, but you don't have to state it clearly. You can tell it like a story, right? Now you could have a thesis if you feel confident doing that and writing an essay crafted with specific details from your life, a collection of details. That can work too. It doesn't have to be necessarily kind of a story with an arc, but for the most part, that's what I would encourage you to do, is to have a plot out the details of your life, basically. Figure out which details matter and how to sort of chronologize them in such a way that it creates a story, a little story. So the inspiration for this was the way that Nikole Hannah-Jones, in her introduction to the 1619 Project, sort of bookends it with these brief personal narratives of her own. The first one being about her father and him flying the flag and her coming to terms with that, and in the context of the African American experience, and then it ended with that anecdote about her being at school and the teacher, when she was a little kid, and the teacher everyone to choose a flag from that represents their heritage, and she from to choose, and so on and so forth. You've read it. So she incorporates these personal narratives into this more argumentative piece, this that details history and goes through this long sort of exposition on the African American experience and where it stands today and how we got here, right? As you know, because you've read it. So in a way, you're sort of doing the opposite, where you're incorporating a kind of historical context into your own story, or at least seeing how the two fit together. You know, we are living in history today now, so kind of look to the things that are in our news now are going to be history tomorrow. So your goal is to set about selecting not only the details from your own life that you're going to include in this narrative, the details from these the textual elements that you want to use as a framework for this story, and create the dynamic between these broader cultural, social elements and your personal details, your personal life. And that's kind of the goal here, to see how they link up and fit together. So I've listed things here just to get you started thinking about it. But you certainly don't have to limit yourself to what's here. And you certainly can talk about multiplicity of these elements, threads. I put some pop culture things in here, only sort of half joking, because these things do frame our perceptions of the world, and they're so mixed up with you know, things that we might consider of holding greater weight. You know, like pop culture is very much intertwined with politics in the age we live in. There's this weird mingling of different spheres of life. So you can have references to pop culture, things that might be in your sphere. But what I don't want to see for any of this is I don't really want to read a 3 or 4 page paper where you're just reviewing the last episode of your favorite TV show. That's not the thing. That's not what we're looking for. So you can include, and maybe should include, references to the things that form your cultural mindset. But for the purposes of this paper, you don't necessarily want to dwell on, you know, you don't want to dwell on a television show or a music video or something. There's a place for that, but this isn't what you should be striving for here. Nonetheless, these things are included in your life. So if there's a reason to reference it, then go right ahead. Again, it's all about selection. Selecting the details that construct the narrative, that are important to conveying the message of the narrative, the lesson, as it were. Trying to use those terms carefully, because again, you don't have to have a pointed lesson, you don't have to have a pointed argument, but there should be something that the reader can derive from the words you've put on the page, whether it's an emotional response or some kind of whether it puts in the head of the reader some kind of intellectual pondering, whether it forces the reader to you know, maybe force the reader into a kind of meditation of something in society. But select carefully. Don't just choose details willy-nilly to fill up the page. You know, make it interesting. Make your words count. You only have, most of you will be writing 3 to 4 pages, which is very short. They should go by quickly. So you don't want to fluff it. You want to put in meaningful elements. So make sure that you're not just arbitrarily putting in details, but that the details help put the reader in a certain mindset, or place them within a certain setting. that sort of thing. And you also have to be careful. Like, let's say you took part in a protest, just for an example. You don't necessarily want to go into the entire history of everything in America that led up to the events of that protest. You don't have the space for it. Just like you have to fragment your own life a little bit, you have to fragment the historical context into which you're writing. So just choose the points that matter, the details from the context that matter to establish the setting of the narrative and the dynamic between that broader context and your personal story. So again, you can pick anything that you know, whether you've been involved with it directly or indirectly. There are things happening around us in the world that are affecting us all in myriad ways right now. So you shouldn't have much trouble choosing some combination of events or a very specific event that create certain cultural conditions that you find yourself in, and that have affected the trajectory of your life, and maybe small ways, some of you more profound ways, perhaps. But there's a whole range. But none of us are living unaffected by things happening around us in society right now. I mean, I would argue that we never are, but now we're living in a time where it's very overt, and these things are, really forming the substance of our lives. I mean, the whole reason we're here, the whole reason that we're conducting this over the computer rather than all being in a room together is because a certain event that is pretty historical has forced us into this situation, and hopefully that will end soon. So again, I listed down here, these are just the things, the guidelines. You can make it as long as you want, but it has to meet this minimum. I don't think there's much ambiguity here. As I stated in the other video, don't try to talk about your entire life, just talk about, select what matters. It's all about selection more than anything else. And be specific. Keep us grounded. Steer away from broad, empty expressions of opinion or sentiment even. Embody the feeling or the opinion in specific tangible elements. So like, let's say you're talking, just for another example, let's say you're talking about COVID, don't say, oh, I was at home and I was bored and it was really boring. There's nothing to do. Instead, just describe yourself like sitting on your couch, staring at a wall, wishing you could go to, the cinema or something. Fill it up with a few keywords. Stating particulars can go a long way in making the reader feel grounded and creating a more unique perspective. Right, so a lot of stuff that's going on right now that might be shaping your current narrative, your current perspective, it could be very political. There's no reason to talk about politics in this unless you want to. But I mean, it's not a requirement if you don't feel comfortable expressing political views in a paper like this. But I encourage you to do so if you feel comfortable doing so. I certainly won't hold anything against you, unless you're just like a closet hateful bigot or something. But I don't think that's probably the case for most people. Hopefully, I hope. But anyway, yeah, don't be afraid about expressing political sentiments or not if you don't want to. I would probably be the only one reading this unless you want to share it with other people, but we won't be doing a peer review or peer response for this one, so bear that in mind as well. Some of you might feel more comfortable knowing that I'm the only one reading it. You might feel more comfortable putting certain things in there than you would otherwise. So be aware of that. I certainly won't show it to anybody without your consent. And then more of just the standard guidelines. Make sure you read this. It's important for efficiency and just ease of submission. First draft due September 15th. So again, I just wanted to give you that introduction, particulars to this assignment. We'll have time on Thursday at the beginning of class to talk about it a little bit more, should you feel the need to do so. And I certainly encourage you to bring to class on Thursday any questions that you might have about this assignment, so we can make sure we're all on the same page and moving in the right direction to create this paper. All right.